Hello again and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second day of the first ever webinar series hosted by the Mindoro Biodiversity Conservation Foundation Incorporated, or MBCFI, in partnership with the Malampaya Joint Venture Partners and with support from the Oceana Philippines. This is a 4-day online seminar that focuses on the state of the Philippine biodiversity. Now, the Philippines is one of the richest countries in the world in terms of biodiversity. With its geographic location and archipelagic setting, the country has high species diversity and endemicity. But then again, it is us humans and our human disturbances that have caused a significant decline in the country's biodiversity, making the Philippines a hotspot. Now, what can we do about it as eco-warriors and concerned citizens? Let us be the voice of Mother Nature. The more we impart knowledge about the importance of biodiversity, the more people will care and protect them and their natural habitat. The less disturbance and loss in biodiversity will lead to fewer chances of adverse effects in our ecosystem and reduce the potential virus outbreak like that of the pandemic right now. We are still in the month of May, and every May we celebrate the month of the ocean with the theme, Para sa Tao, Protected Areas for a Protected Future, and International Day of Biological Diversity with the theme, Our Solutions Are in Nature. MBCFI has organized this special webinar session, which will consist of a series of topics on the current state of Philippine biodiversity on terrestrial, marine, and freshwater, and the threats to biodiversity focusing on invasive species. Now, please take note that this session will be recorded and posted on MBCFI's Facebook page, YouTube, and website, so you could watch our episodes again and again. Now, may I also remind you to send in your questions in the comment section for the Q&A portion after the talk. Now, yesterday, Dr. Leticia Afang joined us and presented the state of the Philippines terrestrial biodiversity. Today, our speaker will focus on the state of the Philippines marine biodiversity. Our guest speaker today is none other than Ms. Desiree Eve Maanyo, a true conversationist at heart with special interest in coastal and marine conservation. Her commitment in protecting the environment and serving the country is attested to by her service since 2009 at the Biodiversity Management Bureau of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. She completed her bachelor's degree in biology, major in ecology at the University of the Philippines in Los Baños. She took her Master's of Science in Environmental Studies degree at the University of Tokyo under the Graduate School of Frontier Sciences. Her research focused on the development of tools in aiding coral reef rehabilitation or restoration. Relentless in her desire to serve the country in the field of marine conservation, she returned to the government services soon after obtaining her master's. She is currently the chief for the Coastal and Marine Management section of the Coastal Marine Division of the DNR BMD. Her works involve review and proposing policies and management strategies on the nationwide management of coastal and marine ecosystems, as well as representing the country in many international conventions and fora on biodiversity, such as those ocean negotiations being held in United Nations headquarters. Ms. Maanyo desires to leave a path for future generations to follow in the field of conservation in this country, endowed with awe and inspiring diversity. Now, friends, let's all welcome Ms. Maanyo.
Thank you, Ms. Aya, for the generous introduction. So, good afternoon, everyone. I trust that everyone is watching is safe wherever you are. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this event from the MBCFI, Executive Director Grace, Miss Grace, and her team. And since we're doing live in FB, this is actually a very good opportunity to show in wider public the significance of the marine biodiversity of the Philippines, its current state, as well as the initiatives and programs that are in place in order to protect these national treasures. It is also very timely because we're celebrating the month of the ocean, with the theme Protected Areas for a Protected Future this whole month of May and the International Day of Biological Diversity last May 22. So I'm going to start my presentation.
Naya Ilak. You watch later, huh?
Before I start the
later,
content of my
mamaya.
presentation, I would like to introduce to you the mandates of the organization which I belong to. The Biodiversity Management Bureau, one of the staff bureaus of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and the lead agency tasked to protect the country's biological diversity and mandated to properly manage and conserve its resources as well as the ecosystem services they provide. So we have three major programs, namely the Protected Area and Ecosystems Management and Protection, the Wildlife Protection and Conservation, the Coastal and Marine Biodiversity Conservation, which I'm working on for currently. So to start with, this is the general picture of how our country is surrounded by so much water. The Philippines is an archipelagic nation which ranks 6th in the world with the longest coastline. We are situated in the Coral Triangle region, which is known as the epicenter for marine biodiversity and what is considered the Amazon of the sea. It is an area with more species of fish and corals than any other marine environment on Earth. The Philippines is also one of the 36 hotspots in the world, meaning we are one of those countries having the richest biodiversity but is significantly threatened and have lost at least 70% of their original habitats. This slide shows you how unique the Philippine biodiversity is. The yellow overlay shows the countries with high biodiversity indices, and the Philippines is one of the 17 so-called mega-diverse countries, meaning they collectively host about more than 70% of the world's species. And then the violet overlay shows that although relatively small compared to other mega-diverse countries, the Philippines has the greatest concentration of unique species per unit area in the world. Now, zooming in on our country's richness in terms of marine biodiversity, it is very important that everyone should know that we are in the center of the world's marine biodiversity. And then in addition, the Verde Island passage found in Mindoro, the southern part of Negros, as well as the Cebu Islands are in the top 7 areas with highest biodiversity importance in the Coral Triangle region. So the richness of the biodiversity in coastal and marine areas are shown in the vast extent of our ecosystem and high species richness found in these different coastal and marine habitats, which I will discuss in detail in the next few slides. These are the coral reefs, the mangrove forests, and the seagrass beds. For the marine species diversity, do you know that the Philippines hosts about 5 out of 7 species of marine turtles? So it's really amazing how rich the Philippine marine waters are. Well, we can discuss in details the state of the coral reefs in the Philippines. But before that, just a quick info about corals for our viewers from the general public. So corals are actually tiny animals called polyps that live in the colonies underwater, either in patches or in extensive reefs. So these are not just stones, which most of our tourists are carelessly stepping on when they go to the beach. So friends, they are a reminder they are animals and very much alive, so don't step on it. The Philippine coral reefs are vital to support the different coastal habitats, which in return support at least 60% of the total population living in the coastal zone or people directly depending on ecosystem services provided by our coral reefs. So in the Philippines, we call coral reefs the bahura. And this important habitat provides food, income, and recreation, as well as they protect us from strong waves and storm surges. In the Philippines, we have about 2.5 million hectares of coral reefs, which is the third largest in the world. The total economic value of the Philippine reefs, different ecosystem services that it provides, valued at about 202 billion pesos per year, based on the study made by Tamayo et al. In 2018. Now for the coral reef baseline data, as shown in the slide, we have lost about this is a hello. Okay. So that for the coral reefs, status of the coral reefs surveyed. Sorry. For the live coral cover surveyed reefs across the Philippines as of 2017, we have shown that after 40 years, 5% of the excellent reefs have been lost. And then now let's talk about the offshore reefs of the country, such as those found in the Kalayaan island group of the West Philippine Sea, which hold about 30% of the total coral reef of the Philippines. So based on the study conducted by the University of the Philippines under the umbrella program of the DNR on coastal and marine, it shows in this slide that the KIG reef system provide massive ecological services, most especially that it acts as a significant coral and fish larval source to all neighboring reefs and as an upstream source of genetic diversity. This means that the protection of the Kalayaan Island Group will benefit not only in the Philippines, but the neighboring Southeast Asian countries as well, as shown in this slide. So the coral and fish larvae can be brought to far distance by ocean currents. So in this slide, it shows the connectivity of the reefs from the offshore reef to the reefs found in the West Philippine Sea region. So the corals and fish larvae can be brought to far distances by ocean currents. Connectivity relates how habitats are connected by this type of movement. So in this slide, the darker reefs are the source reefs which are able to provide larvae for export to suitable growing site called the sinks. Some sites are called self-seeding, the circle, and depending on their local marine which depends on their local marine population for larval supply. So meaning when these self-seeding areas are degraded or damaged, it can be difficult to replenish and it will be difficult to recover because there's no source of larva that is going to replenish the area. However, the pattern of this source and sink patterns are influenced by monsoon seasons. So therefore, protection is critical for larval source habitats and self-seeding sites. So as you can see from this slide, you can already tell what are the critical areas to be protected. And then going into the detail of the field results, it was observed that in the West Philippine Sea, the reef fish species richness or yung dami ng isda, yung how biodiversity rich are our fishes represented by the orange circle is high in protected areas. So specifically those that are found into Bataha and in Upper Reef. Fish biomass and density represented by the gray and blue circles respectively are also high in protected areas. So on the diagram on the left, we also see that the offshore reefs of the KIG, such as those found in the Sabina Shoal and Pag-asa Island, have high fishing potential with an estimated total catch per fisher of 0.5 to 1.5 kilogram per hour. For spear gun fishing, fish catch potential is about 4 to 6 kilogram for half a day or approximately 4 hours. However, we should take note that during the early 1900s, the catch per unit effort was estimated to about 9 kilogram per hour per fisher, while in 2004, there is about 3.5 kilogram per hour per fisher. Hence, it's very evident that there's a decline on the fishery production and that there is merit to protecting our offshore reefs found in the Calayan Island group and those that are in the western part of the Philippines. So this slide shows the coral mortality is highest in the Calayan Island group based on the studies made by the DNR and University of the Philippines through the Clear Cadres project. So we have studied the reefs in the Upper Reefs, Batanes, KIG, Linapakan in Palawan, Quezon, Palawan, and then into Bataha. And then the highest mortality index is found in the Calayan Island group. For the seagrasses in the Philippines, we have the Philippines has also one of the most diverse seagrass species in the world. From the baseline data of 2.73 million hectares coverage, it was reported that 30 to 50% of the Philippine seagrass beds have been lost due to industrial tourism and port developments, despite the ecological and economic value that the seagrass provide. So our seagrass, these are just some example of the ecosystem services that the seagrasses provide. It supports coastal livelihood. Seagrass beds provide habitat for juvenile and small adult fishes such as rabbit fish or yung mga danggit, invertebrates, reptiles, turtles, and mammals like dugong. And they also serve as buffer against waves and storm surges and maintain sediment stability, hence protecting the neighboring mangrove ecosystem and coral reefs. High carbon sequestration rate has been noted also for seagrass ecosystems, contributing to climate change mitigation. So seagrass meadows can store up to twice as much carbon as the world's temperate, compared to the world's temperate and tropical forest. Now, in terms of mangrove forest, the Philippines had around 400,000 to 500,000 hectares of mangrove areas in the early 1900s. The country is one of the richest in mangrove species with 42 mangrove species. And then as of 2017, the mangrove forest in the country have a total cover area of 303,373 hectares, which is still a couple of 100,000 less than its original coverage. Just to show you how much the mangrove ecosystems are very important in mitigating the climate change, these coastal habitats, though much smaller in size than the planet's forests, sequesters carbon at a much faster rate, which is about 2 to 4 times faster, and can store 3 to 5 times more carbon than a tropical forest. So we must remember that these ecosystems have a valuable role to play in terms of climate change mitigation. So aside from the coral reefs, the seagrass beds, the mangrove forest, these are also important coastal habitats found in the Philippines. So we have the beaches, we have which is important for nesting ground for sea turtle. So not only for recreation, but most importantly is that this is where the turtles nest and lay their eggs. And we also have mudflats, which is an important feeding habitat for water birds, and it also prevents storm surges. And we have the deep blue sea, which we know little about, but is home to many life and organisms found in the underwater. So found in these deep habitats are the hydrothermal vents, habitat for extremophiles, as well as the source of genetic materials and novel compounds, such as, for example, some medicines. With all of the ecosystem services that the coastal and marine biodiversity can provide, we can say that these resources are highly valuable. Against the backdrop of an increasing population, the country's rich coastal and marine resources, when harnessed sustainably, may provide viable solutions towards achieving food security and inclusive growth. It is estimated that the coastal and marine ecosystem services value amounts to 286 billion annually, while the total monetary value of the Philippines coral reefs, mangroves, and seagrasses amounts to 15.3 trillion. But actually, in reality, these ecosystems are too valuable and priceless because our lives are actually depends on it. However, despite its importance, which I have discussed, our marine environment faces many threats. So, are you missing the beach? So, who among here missed the swimming in the waters? Raise your hands. So, but did you know that the ocean's biological systems are under stress? We have conducted, in the DNR, we have conducted a nationwide problem tree analysis on the coastal and marine environment and have clustered the results into three major issues and concerns in the coastal and marine environment. We have a problem on pollution, including those pollution from residential and commercial developments. In recent years, plastic pollution, including microplastics, becomes a noticeable issue in the coastal and marine environment. We have also issues on the access, the excessive exploitation of resources such as overfishing, and on the regulation, which include weak law enforcement. We have also issue on indiscriminate habitat destruction. These include loss and conversion of coastal ecosystems and degradation of critical coral systems due to irresponsible tourism. So the various stressors discussed in the previous slide do not always act independently. In some cases, the effects can be additive or even amplified. So the climate-induced extreme weather events, heat waves, cyclones, and typhoons can also damage this ecosystem, and then the global climate change impacts can be compounded by these local anthropogenic pressures or vice versa. So zooming in on the threats to our various marine ecosystems brought by the storm waves and sedimentation, especially after the typhoon, a Philippine-wide storm wave exposure map was developed through the DNRUP Care Cadres project in order to provide the vulnerability inputs to management plans. So areas in orange and red are commonly exposed to strong waves, while green-blue areas are less exposed. These can help identify areas prone to constant coral damage or coastal erosion due to typhoons. Storms also bring about heavy rains which transport materials such as sediment, pollution, and excess nutrients from the upland to the coast. Sedimentation plume maps are developed to show the extent of the sediment release from the rivers and can be indicators for the land use activity regulation. So an example in the slide is the plume map in Zambales based on the remote sensing images captured in November 1995 after the typhoon Racine. Moreover, in terms of coastal integrity and erosion, beach erosion is widespread in areas of Batanes, Zambales, BIP, and Palawan. So some of the factors are the improper construction of drawings, typhoons, and sea level rise. And we have some recommendations in this area. So one of which is to limit the development and follow zoning proper zoning plan. For the beaches, we have to of course regulate tourism. That's why we are also conducting some carrying capacity identification of carrying capacity activities. So still on the threats is the threat brought by the warming of waters which can cause coral bleaching. When water is too warm, corals will expel the algae living in their body, causing the coral to turn completely white. Some corals can survive a bleaching event, but they are under more stress and are subject to mortality. If these reefs are not resilient, they would eventually die. So this, the video that is showing to you are the reefs found in the Snake Island, Honda Bay, Palawan, when the coral bleaching happened or the warming of the water happened in 2016. So we are actually closely monitoring this area for its recovery. So how do we reverse the situation of our ocean? These are the three major keywords that we need to do. We need to protect, we need to conserve, and we need to sustain them, these resources. So this picture shows you the difference of a protected area versus the unprotected area. The Upper Reef Natural Park, which is found between Batangas and Mindoro, hosts the second largest contiguous coral reef in the Philippines, and this one is another one is in the Tubataha Reef Natural Park. Meanwhile, on the unprotected area, meaning there is no legal instrument or no initiatives being undertaken to protect this system, the coral reefs may not be resilient and can actually die when there's catastrophic events. So to manage these resources, we need to define our conservation priorities. So these are some of the approaches to marine biodiversity conservation and management. An example of which is we have the key biodiversity areas, the EBSAs or the ecologically and biologically significant marine areas. We have PSSA or the particularly sensitive sea areas. We have IMMAs, which is important to marine mammal species, and so on. In the Philippines, we have 123 marine key biodiversity areas, which host to 209 globally threatened and 21 restricted range species, such as the mollusk, sharks, rays, reef fishes, sea turtles, and marine mammals. There are 9 marine corridors, which are the areas in the marine environment used by the life forms or the animals to move, to migrate, disperse, ontogenetic habitat shifts, link and connect the marine environment. So, kumbaga, these are the highways in the marine environment, saan dumadaan yung ating mga important marine animals. And then these are the priority seascapes in the Philippines as identified in the Coral Triangle. Philippine National Plan of Action. So we have the West Philippine Sea, North Philippine Sea, the Sulu Sea, the South Philippine Sea. And we also have the Visayan Sea at the middle. And these are now the three EBSAs identified in the Philippines. So again, EBSAs are the ecologically and biologically significant marine areas of the Philippines that are recognized internationally by the Convention of Biological Diversity. We have the intertidal areas of East Asian shallow seas, the Sulu-Sulawesi seascape, and the Philippine Rise. In order to protect those important and significant marine areas, these are our major enabling policies. We have the expanded National Integrated Protected Area System, the amended Fisheries Code, the Wildlife Act, LGU Code, Climate Change Act, the DNR, of course, the DNR mandate, the ICM, the Coral Triangle Initiative, and then the policy on biological diversity. In the recent years, so this slide shows you the history of the management of coastal and marine ecosystems in the DNR. So in the recent years, the government through the DNR BMB has doubled its efforts and investment to save and protect our coastal and marine environment. That is why from more than 2 decades of lessons learned from the first DNR's coastal and marine first DNR's Coastal Environment Program to the Integrated Coastal Resource Management Project and to the Sustainable Coral Reef Ecosystems Management Program, we now develop a more holistic program called Agos ng Buhay or the Coastal and Marine Ecosystems Management Program. For the ongoing and current programs and initiatives of the government, we have a total of 244 protected areas covering the terrestrial and marine areas. Among the 244, 72 of which have marine component, totaling to about 3.1 million hectares or 1.4% of the total sea area of the Philippines, including the exclusive economic zone. We also have locally managed protected areas. So remember, we have we have marine protected areas established under the National Integrated Protected Area System, and then we also have locally managed marine protected areas, which are established by the virtue of Fisheries Code of the Philippines, totaling to about 1,620 scattered nationwide. To complement and contribute to the strengthening of protected area system, the BMB is also implementing this program, which I mentioned earlier. And then the CEMMP was launched in 2017 with the ultimate goal of improving the coastal and marine ecosystems condition to enhance the ecosystem's functions and services, particularly those that are within the NIPAS marine protected areas. The program's main objective is to achieve the effective management of the country's coastal and marine ecosystems, thereby increasing their ability to produce ecological goods and services and to improve the quality of life of the coastal population, particularly ensuring food security, climate change resiliency, and disaster risk reduction. So the program's rationale on focusing the efforts to all coastal habitats are attested by the connectivity of waters. So all habitats are connected by the water circulation through reproduction, exchange, and flow of nutrients and genetics. Hence, cooperation and complementation of efforts are crucial because efforts in one region contribute to the adjacent regions. As I said earlier, 95% of marine organisms use the coral reef, the seagrass, mangroves, and mudflats throughout their life cycle. Our favorite danggit, for example, the adults thrive in the lagoon and estuaries, seabeds, and coral reefs to feed on seaweeds and seagrasses. When they mature, these rabbit fishes aggregate and spawn in the coral reef area. Eggs are then released to the water column and adrift through the water current. So the juveniles settle on the seagrass area where they take their time to grow. So it is also important that we recognize the interconnectedness and interdependence of these habitats, including their functions and services. That's why the focus of the program is more on all the habitats, not only on, for example, not only on coral reefs. So the program has 7 components. We have NPA network establishment and strengthening, the establishment of implementation of biodiversity-friendly enterprise, social enterprise, capacity building, technical assistance, knowledge management, social marketing and mobilization, and monitoring and evaluation. So the MPA network establishment strengthening component aims to ensure that the growing network of the MPAs is representative of the different ocean ecosystems. So we also need to ensure that the marine protected areas are managed effectively and fairly. So to effectively manage a system is to identify and understand its processes, which include threat identification and analysis of the consequent impacts. We also promote the establishment of the BDFEs. So these are the enterprises that do not have significant adverse effects to the environment. These are economic activities that contribute in the maintenance of ecosystem resilience and promote sustainable use of biodiversity. And then the program also supports and promotes for continuous learning and developing pool of trainers and mentors so we can better manage our ocean resources. For the long-term capacity development, the DNR supports the professionals masters in tropical marine ecosystems management, or the PMT-MEM. So it's a collaborative academic program jointly offered by the UP Diliman Academic Program, UP Diliman, UP Visayas, UP Los Baños, that integrates science and experience to address social and ecological concerns that is important to biodiversity and marine conservation. For the knowledge management program, the AGOS database, which has been recently established, will serve as the repository of the data and results of the habitat assessment, the BDFE information, results of joint studies with research institutions, among others. Some of the results are translated to policy brief to support the science-based management decision. For the technical assistance part, I think this is the last, or third to the last, covers various activities which we assist the LGUs in the implementation of basically various coastal and marine ecosystems activities such as management planning, habitat assessment, among others. And then part of the CEMMP is also social marketing component which aims to enhance the formation of positive values among all stakeholders, including the youth, through shared responsibilities in sustainable management of coastal and marine resources. Then lastly, clear monitoring and evaluation standards and guidelines have been set under the program to check if the goals of the program are being met, if the ecosystems are improving, and if the MPA management are effective. So we have also special priority areas, management areas, one of which is the Philippine rice. So we have recently declared the portion of the Philippine rice as marine protected area. It's known for its mesophotic reefs or the deep reefs in the area. This is also the first offshore MPA located in the exclusive economic zone. Another special priority areas is the West Philippine Sea. We have conducted 2 biodiversity expeditions through the DNR UP Care Cados Project and DNR BNB UPMSI Protect WPS project. And we have also proposed for some parts of the West Philippine Sea as marine protected areas. For 2020, we are currently updating and developing the West Philippine Sea long-term plan and roadmap. We're going to roll out the different initiatives and share the scientific information in the West Philippine Sea region. And then, of course, continuous communication campaign for the West Philippine Sea initiatives. We have also different rehabilitation programs in these different areas. And with all of the challenges in the management and threats facing by our coastal and marine biodiversity, we at the government cannot do this alone, and we need to partner with various groups and citizens in order to achieve the goal of sustainable managing of our resources. So these are the different partnership activities. And then the Philippines is also a party to many international conventions, regional agreements on ocean and biodiversity. And lastly, we are also part of many multilateral partnership we have regional initiative. So these are the multilateral partnership of countries working together to address the urgent threats facing the coastal and marine resources of one of the most biologically diverse and ecologically rich regions on Earth, the Coral Triangle. So this is because we recognize that our waters are connected, so we need to act together. So that's the end of my presentation, and I would just like to say that in this time of crisis, we can all practice and advocate online several actions that promotes the healthy oceans. So some of these could be reducing the use of plastics, upcycling, helping our communities in the coastal areas with their sustainable livelihood interventions, promoting local products, or even volunteering to the beach shorelines after this beach cleanup after this pandemic. And then there's a lot that we can do to help our seas to recover. You can also message us on Facebook to guide you on how you can participate in this endeavor in your community. This would be all, and on behalf of the DNR, BND, we wish everyone a happy month of the ocean in the comfort of our homes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Des, for the timely and very informative presentation about the current status of the country's marine biodiversity. Once again, we are reminded that the Philippines is at the center of marine biodiversity of the world, and that is why we really have to work hard to protect, conserve, and sustain our very rich marine biodiversity. Now it's time for us to open up our forum for some questions. Ms. Des, are you ready to answer some questions? Actually, we have 5.
Wow.
Yeah, are you ready?
Okay.
Okay, for our first question, it's from Mr. Kent Sargon. His question is, how does DNR intend to resolve the lack of monitoring efforts in several marine protected areas, inside and outside NEPA's areas?
That's a very good question. Thank you. So actually, in the DNR, that's why we have developed and established the Coastal and Marine Ecosystems Management Program. So we know that in the DNR, we are developing the capacity of our DNR personnel as well as our partners so that they can actually conduct monitoring activities. So we are providing support in this endeavor, and this is part of the DNR's Coastal and Marine Ecosystems Management Program.
Okay. For the second question, we have from Justin Fresnido Paraguison. Since you are working in DNR, how do you reinforce the laws related to the protection of wildlife, both marine and terrestrial, to these violators? I follow a lot of biodiversity-related pages on FB, and it's quite disappointing how DNR deals with it. What is your reaction there, Ma'am Des?
So the question is how do I reinforce the laws? Actually, you reinforce the law when you're you're an advocate. So there's a lot of factors in terms of following the laws, but you have to have an advocacy in protecting the oceans. So what we do, we do in our own little ways, um, follow this, follow some sustainable practices, and we set as an example to our colleagues and to the citizen science and to the citizens.
Okay. Now, third question from Ms. Racel Rescordado. What are the climate change adaptation and mitigation implemented by our coastal LGUs to achieve resilient communities?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
What are the climate change adaptation and mitigation implemented by our coastal LGUs to achieve resilient communities?
Okay. So for this is a very good question also. We actually, when you protect the ocean, when you take part in conserving and protecting the ocean, you are actually taking part in mitigating the effects of the climate change. So when you for example, when we protect these ecosystems, where we take part in protecting these ecosystems, as shown in the presentation earlier, we're protecting those sensitive um, ecosystems like the mangrove forest that can sequester a lot of carbon. So the LG, we're also partnering with a lot of partners and communities in this endeavor. So, and those, we're also rehabilitating the some degraded coastal areas in the Philippines.
Okay. Okay.
Mm.
Okay. For
So,
our fourth question,
yeah,
okay.
okay. Just to emphasize that just by merely taking protection and protection activities in the coastal and marine ecosystems or simple activities, you are taking part of in the mitigation, climate change adaptation and mitigation.
Okay. We have another follow-up question from Mr. Ken Sorgon, and his question is, has DNR harmonized its scientific permits with BFAR, particularly for collecting in protected areas for scientific research?
Um, Well, the answer is that that particular topic is being discussed with the through the convergence with BFAR BFAR BMB convergence. So we have established BFAR BMB convergence, and one of the direction is to harmonize all the required permit that is under the Wildlife Act being required by the RA 9147, and this is actually included in the one of the milestone under the BMB before convergence.
Okay. For our fifth question from Mr. Frank Sampilo, will DNR support coral restoration projects by youth-led orgs?
Hello? Yes po.
Yeah. From Mr. Frank Sampilio, will
Mm-hmm.
DNR support coral restoration projects by youth-led organizations?
So in terms of coral restoration projects, we actually welcome the collaboration with youth led organization. But for coral restoration projects, we have actually released coral rehabilitation guidelines. That is, we should follow the sustainable practice in rehabilitating our coral reef. So it's not just about um, uh, identifying the areas that needs to be rehabilitated or that needs to be restorated, but it's a matter of um, taking understanding the process if the coral restoration activities is sustainable or they're implementing it in a proper way. So they need to seek guidance from the authorities on how, because we have produced the technical guide on how to properly or rehabilitate these coral reef areas. Because and then again, the initiative of rehabilitating the corals are good, but sometimes if not done properly, you can do more harm than helping our oceans.
So they have to get the proper permits from the DNR.
Um, Not really permits, because we have guidelines for the permits. We have BFAR that is in charge for that, but we have the ecological guidance for the coral reef rehabilitation. So
Okay,
it's
so we
actually available online, everything.
Okay, thank you for that information, Ma'am Des. We have two more questions. Second to the last question is from Mr. Clark Bautista. How often does the National Office of DENR follow up with its regional offices with regard to the marine conservation practices? Are there any assessments being done?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Okay, how often does the National Office of DENR follow up with its regional offices with regards to the marine conservation practices? Are there assessments being done?
Yes, we have through the coastal and marine ecosystems management program. We have established the monitoring and evaluation standards. So and then we are conducting yearly monitoring and assessment of these ecosystems, as well as we have a process on how to check if this the management or the MPA management activities are being done properly.
Okay, so for the last question, Ma'am Des, is a very interesting and good question and very timely as well. From Mr. Jerwin Gallego Baure, why is Manila Bay reclamation not being tackled here? Is DNR condoning these destructive projects? We need answers.
Ayan. So, mahirap na question. So, actually, we're not condoning naman these destructive projects, kasi this is clearly a violation of our mandates. But we have to understand that there's a lot of factors in the system, and then we when there's activities, or for example reclamation, there's a standard process, such as the conduct of environmental impact assessment. So those are all taken into considerations when it comes to the reclamation issues. So of
Okay.
course, from the point of view of the Biodiversity Management Bureau, we are in support for the protection and conserving these important ecosystems.
Okay, can you take up one more question, ma'am? Just one more.
Okay.
Okay, from Mr. Ken Sorgan again. What is DNR stand on reclamation projects in Manila Bay, particularly in projects clearing critical habitats such as mangrove forest in Bulacan?
At the moment, I cannot provide the answer, because we're not my office is not cannot answer that question, but there's there's a process on how to go on through this, and then the management, I think, will release official response on that matter.
Okay, so thank you very much, Ms. Des. Now, any last message for our viewers? Can we guarantee that DNR is doing its best to protect our marine biodiversity here in the Philippines?
Ang daming tanong. so it's okay.
Your last message, ma'am.
Actually, happy ako that the general public, the viewers, are very much interested in coastal and marine biodiversity protection and conservation, because clearly the marine biodiversity supports the foundation of life and livelihoods of many Filipinos. So we have to remember that, but we have to take part in taking care of it, and sustaining it for the present and future generation. And we need to recognize our responsibilities as Filipinos. So the condition of our ocean resources in the Philippines today is definitely not on the good side. So, as shown in my presentation. So, that is why we at the government is also making an appeal to our fellow citizens, to our fellow viewers, to help us rally for change in the way we behave towards our environment in general. So, we have to practice, we have to start within ourselves. So, what we do on land, so what we do here, anything here in the land, affects our oceans. So, kahit nakaupo tayo dito, meron tayong ginagawa na nakakaapekto sa ating karagatan. So we may not be able to prevent some of the natural disturbances to wreak havoc our marine habitats, but we have the ability to fight for pursuing sustainable practices. So that would be all. And on behalf of the DNR BNB, thank you for this opportunity to share the state of our uh, country's marine biodiversity. It's very rich. We have to we have to know more about our ocean. We have to keep on swimming. We have to keep on paddling. So thank you and happy month of the ocean.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Des, and thank you for answering our questions. Now, may I call on the Executive Director of MBCFI to award the Certificate of Appreciation to Ma'am Des. Ma'am Grace? Ma'am Grace Diamante, can we award Ma'am Des with our certificate?
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ms. Desiree Maanya. Thank you so much for your time. Despite the ECQ, you were able to allocate a special time to prepare for this. And so I'm awarding this certificate of appreciation to Ms. Desiree Maanya in grateful acknowledgement of her time and expertise as our online speaker with the topic of Philippines marine biodiversity. Given this 25th day of May 2020. So, Ms. Des, thank you so much for all your support. And to all the viewers, thank you for all the questions. We have a lot of questions. And after this, we will reply to all of your questions. And maybe Ms. Des, as our speaker, would also be able to answer a lot of questions online. Just like what we did yesterday, the follow-up questions or the questions left on the FB page, we try to answer all of them. So again, thank you, Ms. Des. On behalf of our organization, I would like to thank everyone for your time in watching our second day webinar session. And we hope to see you again tomorrow at 3 p.m. And as we focus our topic tomorrow on Philippine freshwater biodiversity. So watch out for tomorrow's link, and we will be posting an evaluation form for today's session. So kindly fill it out so we can improve our future activities like this. And again, this webinar is for free, but should you wish to support any of our MBCFI programs, you may donate using the GCash QR code flashed on your screens. So again, to everyone, stay safe and see you again tomorrow. Maraming salamat. Thank you, Ms. Des.